Regional bloc SADC is holding an emergency meeting on Zimbabwe in Angola today. The leaders of South Africa, Tanzania, Zambia and Angola are attending the summit. Current SADC chair, South African President Jacob Zuma, has previously been cautiously optimistic that the situation in Zimbabwe could be resolved amicably. But it's not clear at this stage if his stance has changed following Mugabe's surprise speech on Sunday. Last week, Zuma sent two of his cabinet members to Harare on behalf of SADC to mediate negotiations between Mugabe and the army. Well, let's get you a little more perspective on that story. I'm joined live from our Johannesburg studios by Thuthi Ukani Ndebele, the head of research at the South African Institute of Race Relations. Thank you very much for joining us. What's coming out of the SADC meeting following all the surprise twists and turns out of Zimbabwe? How much of a headache is this for SADC?
Well, thank you very much. Well, in my opinion, and I think this echoes a lot the opinions of the people of Zimbabwe in general, is that SADC itself lost out on an opportunity to become an integral part of Zimbabwean politics and the politics of other countries in general within the region. During the 2008 era, when President Mugabe won an election violently after that runoff. So the general consensus is that even if SADC had to say anything, and even if SADC had to provide any recommendations, which is what they would go as far as doing, there's little chance that they have any kind of influence on what goes on in Zimbabwe. I think you may have heard that even the army officers themselves have said that they do not want any involvement from outside, and including the people of Zimbabwe themselves have said they do not want anything coming from SADC, because at the time that the elections were violently won in 2008 by Robert Mugabe, the SADC region and all these other countries then said, well, let Zimbabweans solve their own problems. So the question now is, why can we not be allowed to solve our own problems, because this is what we are meant to do in any case?
Okay, well, it sounds like SADC can't do much. Let's talk about the concern of instability in Zimbabwe for the region. What's your view on that?
Now, the concerns come in many fronts. I mean, the core one being especially, the question of trade and foreign investment. And I think when you look at foreign investment in particular, a lot of countries outside the region, well, take for example Western countries, let's say for example the United States. The United States and all these other countries would see a situation in Zimbabwe as a situation affecting the whole region. So it means it has an impact, a negative one, on their outlook, on the potential investment that they might want to bring in. On the trade side, you will look at the potential of, I mean, if the Zimbabwean economy is not functioning well, then the demand for goods might also be affected. So one thing that you might not know is that South Africa happens to be one of the major trading partners for Zimbabwe. So you do not want a situation whereby problems in Zimbabwe end up affecting what's happening here, because as an example, some of the major retailers and companies from South Africa actually operate in Zimbabwe. For example, Pick n Pay. You've got your Old Mutual and so on. But on the side of migration and security, also think about the fact that if it escalates to a point, and we should consider all the risks. If it escalates to a point where you get to a civil war, for example, you might find that there would have to be a lot more people moving out of Zimbabwe, and we can't then say, well, you're just moving out because of economic reasons. Now you have real refugees, and it's not just economic migrants. So, you know, the generality of it is that it will cause a certain level of instability, whether economically, whether in terms of migration and security.
And finally, very briefly, if you will, is there a clear solution to the crisis, do you think?
Well, the problem at this point is that everything is unclear, because we have on one hand the ruling party saying it's instituting an action for impeachment in terms of Section 97 of the Constitution. On the other hand, the army says, well, we have negotiations at an advanced stage, and we are looking at bringing Mnangagwa back. On one hand, the people of Zimbabwe are saying, well, part of the problem is that we think that this is not even about Zimbabweans, it's actually about the ruling party. So now the catch-22 is that the army has to find a way of legitimizing this whole process from start, because you may have heard that they do not want to call it a coup, they want to call it something else, a military action or something. And what they now need to do is to find a way a legal loophole to make this look legitimate, because in the end they will be seen as having taken the country by force.
Okay, thank you very much. That was Thuthukani Ndebele, who is Head of Research at the South African Institute of Race Relations.